To begin, picture a barren landscape strewn with garbage, with only a single skeleton of an old tree. There are two men who explore, who debate, who offer comfort to one another as they wait for something. This is the world of the playwright Samuel Beckett. The two men are waiting for Godot, a mysterious figure with a white beard who never arrives on stage. I hope I haven't spoiled the ending for you. It may seem like a strange way to begin a high holiday sermon, or any sermon for that matter, but for me, every year, as we approach these high holy days, I think of this weird and wonderful play. It's tragedy, it's comedy, it's farce, it's nonsense. It is the perfect entree into the days of awe. For Beckett set out to create a small universe on stage, the tragedy and the comedy of life played out between these two men in bowler hats. In Waiting for Godot, the playwright and his characters are each struggling with fundamental questions of human existence. Perhaps this one bit of dialogue will suffice. One says to his friend, "We are all born mad, and some of us remain so." And he replies, "But we don't manage too badly, huh? Between the two of us, we always find something, don't we, to give us the impression that we actually exist." In this drama of the absurd, the search for meaning itself is fleshed out in three dimensions. I think sometimes that in order to express that kind of ennui, that's why Beckett had to write it in French. Life's meaning, he declares, is only here and only now. Life is not foretold, it is difficult, it is a struggle, and very often we only find ourselves by losing our way. We are left like those two on stage, waiting for an answer that will never come, waiting for divinity to reveal itself to us, like at the sea, at the burning bush, like at the foot of the mountain. We are only left with questions, and it is these questions that motivate us tonight. What gives life meaning? How should I act differently or for the better? How can I make my life mean something? What is it that is inhibiting me, that prevents me from living more fully? What am I waiting for to actually take the next step in my life? We are on Beckett's stage tonight. Tonight, we once again gather to ask the questions together. The most concise Jewish formulation of this question comes from the prophet Micah, who asks, "What does God demand of you? What rules govern the choices that we make? What is our responsibility to one another?" I suppose the uncomfortable word in his composition is demand. We don't picture God as one who demands things from us. A demanding God feels like just another reason to reject or to ignore or to deny God. The world of obligation seems somehow incongruent with our values of reform. We believe in choice, isn't that right? We study and we learn the traditions of our ancestors, and we only take upon ourselves those which carry the weight of meaning. The traditions we follow are the ones we find meaningful. Except we know faith doesn't really work that way. Our personal belief systems, they come from somewhere deeper, somewhere that commitments are made with the heart, not with the head. Why do I continue to make this recipe of my grandmother's? I am compelled to do it, yes, and it is meaningful. Why do I give of myself to help the needy, to feed the hungry, to provide shelter to the homeless? Again, it's meaningful, yes, but that's not why I do it. I am compelled to help those I can from somewhere much deeper in my history and in my kishkas. I do it because I see the unity of all things, and that compels me. I am compelled. I am commanded. My God demands this of me. So what does God demand of you? Micah's response seems strange at first. He writes, "What does God demand of you? Only this, to do justice, to love mercy, and to walk humbly before God." Only this, as if it were easy, as if it were the most natural thing to live our lives to our full potential, to walk in the world acting justly and merciful at all times. Or maybe Micah is telling us something else entirely. Do not think, says Moses near the end of his life, that this idea of mitzvah that I give you today is far away. It's not across the sea or in the heavens that you would need someone else to get it for you, to teach it to you. It is in your mouth and in your heart to do it. Sometimes Judaism and all of it entails foreign languages, foreign rituals. All of it might seem more of an obligation than we are prepared to make. I believe that Micah is not diminishing the value of his words, but rather strengthening his faith in you. What does God demand of you? What should we feel obligated to do for one another and for ourselves in this life and in this year coming ahead? The answer is simple, but simple in the way that the hardest things to learn are the least complicated. It is only this. Unlike many of the prophets, you see, Micah experienced directly the fall of Jerusalem and the shift away from sacrifices at the temple. Micah saw with his own eyes what it looked like for a people to wander away, to fall apart by neglecting its values, its history, its wisdom. He actually lived in a village not far from the border between what was known as Judea and Samaria, the very location where the nation split, it fractured. And that would soon lead to its entire destruction. So he understood the dangers of inaction and of waiting. He witnessed the ancient teachings of Moses fading into the past. And while once he saw the Israelites had been successful in creating this new nation, a new kind of nation, now they were oppressing the poor. They were, quote, making crooked all that was straight. And Micah, in the great prophetic tradition, calls on his people to turn, to begin to turn back, to return, to make teshuvah. Micah's plea rings loudly in our ears today. He tells us not to expect fire and brimstone for our laziness. Rather, he says, your lack of care will cause the heritage that you claim to cherish to just wither on the vine, to no longer be relevant. In Micah's words, he says, Zion will be plowed like a field, Jerusalem will turn to ruins, and the Temple Mount will grow trees through the ceiling. This is not the machination of some vengeful God. These are the natural outcomes of apathy and neglect. Judaism doesn't die because we are punished for wrongdoing. Sin is part of being human. Judaism dies because we stop caring about it and it falls into disrepair. Our hearts will turn away. The temple will become overgrown. The dream of Zion reduced to a field for farmland. During Shabbat Shuvah, the Sabbath in between this holy day and the next, we read a different passage from Micah. During the 10 days of repentance, Aseret Yemei Teshuvah, Micah calls to God on our behalf. Who is like you, forgiving iniquity, remitting transgression? You have not sustained your wrath upon us forever because you, O God, love mercy. You, O God, will take us back with love, will cover over our iniquities, will hurl our sins into the depths of the sea. You see, God doesn't drive us away, not from each other, not from the community. God is not an instrument of punishment. God is the still small voice within you, even now, reminding each of us of the Jewish values of equality and equity, understanding and forgiveness, caring for the vulnerable, empowering all created in God's image and of our immense responsibility to manifest those values into the world, into the real world. God doesn't punish. We do that to ourselves well enough. God gives strength. God provides us courage. God is the power which brings us back to ourselves and to our community. So many of you in recent months have spoken about the way that you're thinking about life and the way you think about the synagogue have changed. We no longer take this for granted, this opportunity to be with each other, to reconnect with a sense of renewal in person on Rosh Hashanah. Emerging slowly from a global pandemic, we see with new eyes this history that we possessed, this legacy that we carry, the fragility of that which we treasure most, our freedom, our learning, our Jewish souls. It turns out they are more fragile than we knew, and they are our responsibility to protect. What does God demand of you? We ask through Micah how to begin, which way to turn. How are we supposed to live? In what Abraham Joshua Heschel calls the most urgent question of religious existence, Micah asks, how should I approach God? What is expected of me? It would be easy to think that God needs prayer. Had I just come to Shabbat services more often in this past year, I would be assured of health and happiness in the coming year. And maybe if I really buckle down in the next 10 days, I can make up for some lost time. I'll take this one day off of work to get in a few more prayers. Micah's response resonates as clearly today as it would have in the declining days of King Hezekiah. You humans, he cries, you mortal, fallible, corruptible humans. God has already told you what is good, what is required of you, and it is not more prayer. It is only this: do justice, love mercy, and walk humbly before God. Justice and mercy, those words evoke a particular image. In the mystical tradition, these are two forces that oppose one another, or rather, they balance one another. Where justice is cold and calculating, mercy is warm and fuzzy. Justice is strict adherence to the law, and mercy is the second chances that we give, and perhaps the third and the fourth. And the sages are teaching us that one is not possible without the other. Were strict justice to rule the world alone, not one of us would survive. We would all bear our sin. But if mercy were too powerful, no one would be held accountable for their actions. The commentary argues there is no true justice unless mercy is part of it. So God balances justice with mercy and loving kindness. And we are commanded, we are obligated, we owe it to one another to do the same. So today, this first day of Cheshbon HaNefesh, this accounting of our souls, may we consider the many relationships in our lives, our family, our friends, co-workers, colleagues. And here are the two questions that we need to ask. Who in my life have I judged too harshly or too quickly? And who have I let take advantage of me? With whom might I draw a firmer line to strengthen my own stance and strengthen the relationship? In other words, have I found the right balance of justice and mercy to allow the many people in my life who I care about to help me become my best self and to become the best version of themselves through me? Every time we say the Shema, we reaffirm our belief that this is how the world is run. Hear, O Israel, we say, Adonai, the name of God associated with mercy, is Eloheinu, the name of God associated with justice. Adonai is one. Both aspects of God are manifest here on earth and with us. Both are vital to the very Jewish and human project of making this world better. Let's not forget the third part of Micah's beautiful ethic. Do justice, love mercy, and walk humbly before God. How do we ensure we get this right balance between strict justice and loving kindness? We move forward with humility. You have to recognize that only God gets that balance right, and we only strive for it. We sit here today reminded of time stretching out, the time that has passed since we last gathered in these numbers and in this holy space. But we are also reminded of the time that stretches out in front of us, the days which seem endless even though we know they're not. And that's it. That's the message that you came to hear. Help me, O God, to number my days. Help me to pay attention to this passing moment while I am still here. Let me not become complacent or apathetic. And we so desperately need this refocusing, this inspiration. We are divided, having all but forgotten the strength in unity and patience and forgiveness which held us together for so long. Through historical times of chaos, division, even violence, Jews have always known the value of standing together. It will take a collective effort this year to return, to change, to walk humbly before God. What does God demand of you? Here is our chance to begin to answer, to turn the page and start anew. To turn from what life has chosen from us toward what we might choose for our own lives. Take a first step. We have all waited too long to get started. The resolutions of past years echoing like empty vows. We have been waiting for Godot, like Beckett's fools. We wait for God, we wait for salvation. The word Godot actually refers to death or nothingness. Sometimes we wait for that too. We wait to find meaning. We wait for God to reveal our right path. For Beckett, the only sign of Godot's presence is a young messenger who explains that he won't come today, but certainly tomorrow. More waiting. Let us remember on this Rosh Hashanah that we celebrate renewal with the entire world. What better moment to pull ourselves out of stagnation than this anniversary of God's creation, a time when all things begin to change. The trees, the winds, even the birds migrate. Even they know it is time to get moving. At the heart of waiting for Godot, having considered every possible means of escape, Beckett's fools make an observation. One says, we could start all over again. The response, that should be easy. It's the start that's difficult, he says. You can start from anything. Yes, but you have to decide. Enough waiting. Enough waiting. What does God demand of us? It is simple, and yet it is everything. With justice and mercy as our guides, let us begin to walk with humility, to encounter each other. For these 10 days, let us start with that.